Quick announcement before we jump into the episode. The 8-week parenting pivot where you'll learn how to implement Connect Method parenting, get your kids to want to listen to, is starting October 28th. Head over to cmp.works/pivot to find out more. One of the best secrets I've learned is that in our day and age, most of the time, up to 90% of the time, the fear that we've created is unnecessary. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Yo, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is officially the first podcast in the second year of the Connect Method Parenting Podcast. So proud of that. Love doing a little raw and real episode last week. Talked about drama at the train station. It had just happened. It was raw and fresh. And so glad that I was able to just lay it all out for you. It was a perfect 1-year episode. Now we're moving into the second year. We're talking about fear today. Seems quite appropriate, especially with everything going on with us traveling internationally right now. I have had a whole new opportunity to look at my fears. It's been really fascinating and really surprising. But before we dive into the fear episode, I got to tell you one thing that happened because of this international traveling we're doing. I had to push back the start date for the pivot. Now, why, you might ask? Because I completely underestimated how long it would take my body to acclimate and adjust to a new time zone, and just the demands of traveling and trying to balance work and travel was a lot harder than I thought. So I completely overestimated my capacity to get things done, and I just am not ready for us to be starting. Actually, it's supposed to start today. The day you're listening to this podcast was supposed to be the start day of the pivot, and we're pushing it back to the 28th. So if you've already locked and loaded yourself into the pivot, know you get a couple extra weeks before we get started. If you have been on the fence, good news is you can still join until the 26th. We'll close down. We will close them down, the applications that is. So you can still apply. You can go to cmp.works/pivot or just connectmethodparenting.com. You'll see it all there. I've changed everything, hopefully. But if you still see the 7th, no, it's actually the 28th. So it's just part of life. Got a family and kids, and we're doing this crazy thing. So yeah. Oh, well, I wish we were starting today, but better to start when everything's in order. So that's what's happening. Real quick announcement. Should we jump into fear now? Are you so excited? Fear has come up for me so much over the last, how long have we been out? 3.5 weeks. And you've heard me mention it in a couple of episodes that I've recorded since we've been out, especially last week, drama at the train station. And it's one of those topics that comes up more than any other topic when I'm coaching moms, sometimes very directly. Mom will say, hey, I'm afraid to stop giving consequences because I think my kids will never learn. Super clear, right? Fear, fear, fear. But a lot of the times, I'd say over half the time, the fear is indirectly implied, probably not even seen by the parent, but it's really clear to me that it's the underlying driver. So they'll say something to me like, I feel resentment towards my mother. I feel disappointed with my kids. I'm upset that I lost my cool last night. And if you read between the lines, there's fear motivating every one of those statements. So let's go through them one by one real fast. I feel resentment towards my mother. There's this fear of what will happen if I stop letting her bother me. Will she take advantage of me? So I'm afraid of what this will do for me. And will I be safe if I don't have resentment towards my mother? Will she walk all over me again? Or let's go to the I am disappointed with my kids. So if I don't fix their behavior, bad things are going to happen. Their teachers are going to fail them. They're not going to get their homework done. I've got to be disappointed with them. Or I'm upset with myself that I lost my cool. All of these I can relate to, but this one I was exceptionally good at. And I was really afraid that if I didn't beat myself up, that I wouldn't learn how to be a better mom. So even though these might feel very valid to our brains, I want to just call this out that fear is never a legitimate reason for holding back, for staying stuck, for not creating something amazing in your life. Now, that being said, I also want to say that fear is valid. It's not a problem that we have it. Fear just becomes a problem if we use it in a way that keeps us stuck, where we're avoiding situations or conversations or people, and we're spinning in non-productive cycles. So to recap, fear should not keep you from moving forward. That would be the ultimate goal. So we notice where fear is stopping us and we eliminate it. It doesn't need to keep us where we are. Fear is a sign. It's just a signal that your nervous system has a program in place that it thinks it needs to run to keep you safe. But I would also love for you to look at fear as an invitation to feel an emotion, to increase capacity to process, to improve our ability to live life full out without letting fear stop us. So fear is an invitation to get curious and ultimately create the capacity to handle fear better. And if the fear does create a total nervous system takeover, like the experience I shared in drama at the train station, no biggie. No biggie. It's just, again, information letting you know that your current neural pathway runs the show in situations of high stress or situations that are reoccurring, like bedtime or dealing with a certain child, and it's totally fine. And understanding this and welcoming in the emotion as a normal part of the human experience is the first step to getting to the point where fear doesn't stop you or drive you anymore. But I have to just say this, that fear itself doesn't justify staying in inaction, avoidance, or helplessness. Fear is such a strong emotion. It is such a powerful emotion. It often makes us feel as though something is terribly wrong and that our life is in mortal danger. And there's a reason for this. Historically speaking, fear was very valid. We needed it so that we would stay alive. We needed to run away from dangerous things. And that's really important. The problem is we've outgrown it in the society most of us live in. There's very few things that are literally going to injure us or kill us like a lion. However, developmentally, we are still trying to get our nervous systems to adapt to our current conditions. So we're learning to bridge this gap. And what we're talking about today is how we do that, how we deal with the default way our nervous system has been conditioned over many, many generations, and don't let it stop us from living full out in this new world that we all get to live in. This month in League, if you're in Mastery specifically, we're doing Dare of the Day. And this is the point, you all, if you're in there, I want you to listen to this episode with our Dare of the Day challenge in mind, because that is in part what we're working on. It's taking specific action deliberately, intentionally, that elicit a little bit of fear, a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of trepidation, and moving forward anyway to help our nervous system get the message that it's okay. We're not going to die. Yeah, it feels awful, and that's okay, but it's totally safe to feel fear. The more acquainted you become with fear, the less awful fear feels. Now, this is one of those concepts that you're going to have to wrap your mind around. You might have to listen to this a couple of times because you might not have questioned or thought about fear in the way we're going to talk about it today. Fear doesn't mean something's gone wrong. Fear means you're human. It means you're a human being and that you're wired for survival. And up until the very present times, we've needed that. So even though we're not getting threatened by tigers, it still does serve us today in many, many ways. It keeps us from doing dangerous things like jumping off cliffs, running into traffic, driving like a maniac on the freeway. So fear serves us in many, many ways, but we need to be catching the ways that it's not serving us anymore. So I think first and foremost, accepting that fear is going to be part of your life and that irrational fear is going to be part of your life is very helpful. So helpful when we can just see it and not judge ourselves and not believe it either. Fear doesn't mean stop. I can't say that enough. And actually, you don't have to be fearless before you take action. That's another misnomer. People think, well, I can't until it is totally resolved and I have no more fear in my life. Well, that's not going to happen. So we have to learn how to handle the fear, not eradicate the fear. In fact, sometimes taking action while you're acknowledging your fear, even welcoming the fear into your life, into your experience, is one of the most powerful things you can do. So you need to remember that our emotions come from our thoughts. Regardless of those thoughts being conscious or subconscious, we have a perception of something, which is a thought about something. And then depending on that thought, we have a matching emotional experience. So when we think a thought, that thought causes that emotion. So most of the fear that we feel comes from a thought we have in our mind. And most of those thoughts, they're completely irrational. So if you think about the majority of your fear is coming from something you're thinking, and that thought is most likely irrational or illogical. So you can just let that blow your mind for a minute. This fact that you're creating your own fear with your mind and letting it stop you. Now, let me be clear. You aren't typically aware of the thoughts that are creating this fear. It's subconscious. It's a perception that maybe has been taught to you for years by how other people in your life have thought about things, or it's just this genetic survival instinct. But there is some type of filter. There is some thought that is creating fear around things that seem to be dangerous to us. So let me give you a simple example of how we can start to unpack our fear filter. So when I first got married, my husband would scare me all of the time. He would jump around corners, scare me, do all sorts of funny stuff that now I can laugh about. But at the time, it wasn't funny or okay because I was raised in a home where we didn't do that kind of stuff. And if we did scare people, we were in trouble. So my filter, my thought that had been put into my brain for decades was, this is not how we treat people. This is not okay. This is how you get in trouble. You shouldn't scare people. And his filter was, scaring is funny. This is what we do. It's a bonding experience. It's part of our family culture. So at first, my filter was not okay, not okay. And I would jump and I would scream and I would be upset. And eventually, I learned to change my filter, not as much as him. And if he was here, he'd probably say maybe I didn't change it at all. But I have definitely changed my filter where scaring is okay. And it's not a danger that I need to protect myself. It's not something I'm as afraid of. So we have these filters, they can change. And it's just a matter of us wanting to change them, doing the work, and really being patient with ourselves. It's good for us to have default filters, or you could call them thoughts, that allow us to react quickly, to have that adrenaline pump through us so we can get the heck out of there. Because that's what, when my husband first started jumping out of around corners and scaring me, it could have been a tiger back in the day. So it was really helpful for me to have this default fear reaction to protect myself. But in the case of being at home with my husband and him jumping around the doorway, it was completely unnecessary. I didn't need to run. I wasn't going to be harmed, but my brain didn't know that at first. Eventually, I got used to the scare tactics. I didn't jump so high, and I would recover or start laughing way easier. And there are fears that are linked to unconscious thoughts that are so deep that we need to get specialized help to work through them. However, I'm not going to be talking about that type of fear here today, because that's not the majority of the fear that we're experiencing when we're implementing Connect Method parenting. By thinking really fearful thoughts, we create the stimulus, that response in our body that, causes all sorts of issues. One of the things that's great about fear, that's awesome about fear, is it gets us moving really quickly. We get that shot of adrenaline, our muscles tense up, we become more alert. We have that kind of stimulating energy that gets us out of danger. And that's a good thing, unless we're sitting in the school pickup line thinking about what our mother is going to say when we tell her we don't want her to come over today. Or we're thinking about what the kids' teachers are thinking about us because our child was struggling to get their homework done last night and just didn't get it done. Or we're worried about what we're going to wear to that party this weekend and what people will think, and we're having this same fear response. Or we're thinking about how our teenager might react when we have to set that phone limit that we've been putting off but really need to do, and we can't stop feeling afraid and unsure of ourselves. That's where fear and creating fear with our minds does not serve us. So that's when I said in the beginning, fear is not a valid reason for not taking action. It means that your nervous system is having a feeling that something is unsafe, and the thoughts you're having, that you're thinking, are creating fear that's either stopping you from taking action, or you're taking action, but it's fueled by fear, so it's not very productive. And in that case, I want you to honor that fear enough so that you can find the cause, you can find the patterns that are causing it, and then change it. But I don't want you to indulge in it and believe in the patterns and stay stuck. If you're not able to change the fear immediately, don't worry about it. It's okay. We start with the curiosity. We look at these patterned thoughts, and we begin to learn how to take action anyway, even if fear is coming along for the ride. There's two reasons why I believe you're going to want to take action, even if you're feeling fear, and even though you know that fear is coming from some illogical, irrational thought. The first reason is that when you take action and you put yourself out there and you do something that you're afraid of, you begin to prove those irrational fears wrong. You're able to go out there and actually take action and see that you didn't die, see that you survived, you're fine, and experience the feeling of fear and get through to the other side. And when you look at the science and psychology of fear, especially in cases of phobias and irrational fears, one of the treatments is called exposure therapy. Now, we have to be careful with this, but what I've learned about exposure therapy is that if someone has a fear of spiders or snakes and they gradually expose themselves to those fears in a safe environment, it can help them form a new understanding that spiders and snakes aren't actually dangerous. And we're going to take a page out of that and do it very gently with ourselves, with our own fears. By facing the things we're irrationally afraid of, we're going to teach ourselves that they aren't as scary as we thought. So think about it. Many of our fears are pretty irrational. We're afraid of public speaking, worried about how people will see us. We're afraid of what people might think of our house. We're afraid of what our kids' behavior, if it goes off track in public, what other people will think. But when you really think about it, what's the worst that could happen? If you get up on stage, let's do public speaking, because this is a pretty common fear people have, and people laugh at you, you're not in any real danger. You're not going to die from it. Yet some people fear public speaking more than death itself, which just shows how illogical our fears can be. So think about all the things you're afraid of. In fact, I recommend pulling out a piece of paper right now, start writing down all of the things that you're afraid of as you continue to listen to this episode. I'm guessing most of the things, if not all of the things on the list, have nothing to do with life or death. They might feel dangerous. They might feel like life or death, but they won't really kill you. Typically, what we're afraid of has nothing to do with whether we're going to survive or not. So the main things that we're afraid of are our emotions, what we will feel or the emotion we will have when we do that thing. So let's bring it back to public speaking. We think about making a mistake. We're up on stage, the lights are on us, everyone's laughing at us. Or we think about making a decision and then everybody is frustrated with us because we made a decision and they don't like it. And we get really terrified of those situations because we are afraid of feeling humiliated. We're afraid of feeling rejected. So a feeling is what we're really afraid of. A feeling that we create by the meaning we make about other people's behavior. And we don't really think this through. We just stop at the fear. We have made fear mean something terrible is going to happen or that death is drawing near. And so typically, because it's so extreme, we haven't done the work to uncouple the fear from the meaning we've placed around the thing. So we go into autopilot and the nervous system takes over. But like I was mentioning above, taking action while you're still feeling fear is actually a skill you can develop. Or maybe a better way to say it, it's an emotional capacity or maturity you can develop. It's less of a learned skill and more of an increased feeling or safety capacity. Most of us are still reacting to our knee-jerk default programming. When there's fear, you run, you stop, you freeze, you don't do it, which again, super useful if there's real danger. Completely not useful when there's not real danger. When we can think about what's really the worst that can happen, and we can see how it's illogical, and typically the worst that can happen is an emotion we're going to feel. Once we get to that point, then we can take action and feel the emotion of fear along the way without stopping. And I will say in my life, being able to take action while I'm still feeling a little bit of fear, while I'm still feeling a little bit of nervousness or anxiousness, and knowing that that emotion of fear is being caused by a thought in my mind has made me so much more successful than I would have been otherwise. Because I put myself out there because I realize that fear is okay. It's okay to feel fear. Doesn't mean anything negative. It's not going to hurt me. And if anything, I've started to spin it and make it mean everything's going well. Everything's going perfectly, because that discomfort that fear brings for me is an indication that I'm pushing myself to my next level. I was talking to these two really good friends yesterday who are both amazing coaches, and we were talking about fear. They didn't know I was preparing this podcast, which was fantastic. I love how there's these beautiful synchronicities in our life. And my friend Rebecca and I were going off like it was the news that when you do big things, you have fear. You have anxiety, you have worry, no problem, it's okay. And then Jennifer, the third friend on the call, said, you guys, I don't think that's always the truth. I think we can do big things, and sometimes we don't have to have fear. I want you to question that. And thank you, Jennifer, for questioning us. It was such a good conversation. And we came to this conclusion that sometimes we can have something that's stretching us and not have high levels of fear around it. I think because we have safety around the situation. And sometimes we can have really big emotions around some new big thing that's outside our comfort zone, but we are learning to have more safety around the fear. Because Rebecca and I were talking about the reality of what we are going through, these big things we're pushing ourselves to do. And yeah, we have probably the same amount of fear in our bodies as we had, 5 years ago, but it doesn't impact us the same way. It's not stopping us. It's exactly what we're talking about today. I feel the fear. I'm okay with it. I'm not using willpower. I'm using acceptance to move through it. And I'm moving forward anyway. Okay, moving on. The other really important thing to know about fear is that most of us don't actually feel it. When I ask moms I'm working with to tell me what fear feels like, they usually describe the resistance to fear. So they know that when the fear comes up, they either avoid it or push it away. And when that happens, when any kind of vibration, emotion comes up in our body that is fear, there is actually a fear of feeling fear. Make sense? But if you listen to some scientists describe what fear is as a reaction in the body, it's an increased heart rate. It's a tensing of muscles, maybe a tingling of the skin. And when I start to describe it like that, I start to say, well, what's the big deal then? Why are we all freaked out about an increased heart rate or muscles tensing up? But it's because we don't actually sit there and say, okay, I'm just going to experience fear right now. I'm going to feel the emotion of fear. I'm going to allow myself to really let it flow through me. Most of us, when any kind of fear comes up, we run away from it. We avoid it, which makes sense. That's how we were programmed to be. So many of the parents I work with avoid feeling fear by overdoing something, over-exercising, over-organizing, overeating, overworking, over-drinking, overthinking, over-worrying, over-resisting instead of feeling it. When you learn how to embrace or feel the emotion instead of resist or avoid the emotion of fear, you're going to realize that there's very little fear when it comes to fear. And so I'd actually like to recommend that you try doing that. Sit down, be present with yourself while you're feeling the emotion of fear. And if you're in league, pop into office hours, and I'd love for you to share in the group your experience of it. But if you're not in league, you can join next time, change your life. But if you're not in league, do this for yourself, okay? So back to feeling fear. What does fear really feel like when you allow yourself to feel the emotion of fear? And notice when you're feeling it. What situations do you feel it in? When does that desire to resist, avoid, or push it away come up? It's fascinating. I've had to do this a lot more lately with us traveling international for the next 6 months with my kids. And yesterday we were at the beach and I had to head back to our apartment to do some client calls. And my husband needed to do some work, but he was going a different direction. So we had to leave my girls at the beach. And they had their bus passes. They've actually made the trek once by themselves. So they're plenty old enough, 16, 17, and 22. Plenty old enough to navigate the transportation system. And we've been here for almost 2 weeks now. So they're getting the hang of it. And they have this great mapping app on their phone called City Mapper. Highly recommend that app if you're in a big city. It does so great with public transportation and walking directions. Anyway, so they're all set. But as I was leaving, and I really had to leave because I was cutting it really close to make it back, this fear crept in. I was walking as fast as I could down to the metro. And for me, for whatever reason, it's always they're going to get kidnapped. Or yesterday, a new one slipped in. This was fantastic. It was they're going to get hit by a car because they're looking at their app to give them directions and they're going to accidentally walk into the road. I love Barcelona, but they are not happy with pedestrians that aren't paying attention to the laws and to the rules. So other cities we've been to lately, Amsterdam and Prague, both were over the top generous. The drivers were over the top generous with pedestrians and stopping when they didn't need to stop. But it's different here in Barcelona, totally fine. But my brain started thinking about that. And so it was, they're going to get kidnapped or hit by a car. So on my journey home, which took almost an hour because of traffic, I had to keep bringing myself back to feeling fear and reminding myself it was okay to feel the fear. I love using this formula that I first learned from Dr. Neufeld, where he was advocating that everybody talk about emotions in a more accurate way. So he told us all that were in the training to say, this is fear, or I have, name the emotion. So I use that all the time. And I was saying it to myself on the bus. I have fear. I have fear. This is fear. And I noticed where it was in my body. And then I'd say to myself, it's safe to feel this emotion. It makes sense that I'm feeling fear. Of course I'm feeling fear. I can feel this fear. Fear doesn't mean anything bad's going to happen. It's just my nervous system trying to protect myself. So I was saying things like that to myself as needed. And I said it over and over again. The emotion of fear would ebb and flow like the tide. So when it got stronger, I would just slow my mind down and be with myself. So an hour of me doing this almost, which included while I was walking, while I was on the metro, while I was on the bus, my nervous system wanted to take over bad. My brain wanted to avoid feeling this emotion of fear. I wanted to distract myself by watching reels or something, but instead I chose to just feel the fear. And the strategic byproduct of this work of feeling my fear, which has been crazy escalated for the past 3 weeks since we started traveling, has definitely resulted in a massive increase in my ability to feel and process fear in these new situations. The other thing that's so interesting to me about emotion is, and I kind of referenced this earlier with the idea of humiliation in public speaking, is that many of us have a fear, not only of feeling fear, but we have a fear of feeling pain. We have a fear of being hurt. And so when you think about how we layer emotions on top of emotions, it's really fascinating. I watched Becca, she's my 16-year-old, she's my youngest this summer. She had to get a physical and we had to get her blood drawn. And the fear of the pain was actually worse than the pain itself. So we had to walk from the doctor's office across the parking lot to the lab where they ordered for her blood to get drawn. And it wasn't a very long walk. It's not a very big parking lot, but the whole way over, she was saying, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. Do you think this is going to hurt? Which makes total sense. Then we're sitting in the waiting room and she's continuing to go through these questions and talk about how scared she is, to the point where a lady there heard her and just interrupted us and said, I heard what you were saying. And I just have to say that I come here every couple of weeks because of a condition I have to get my blood drawn, and they really are the best. And, she was helping her see different options, different ways to look at it, trying to help her calm down, which helped. And then they called us back, and then Becca's sitting in the chair where they have those 2 plastic padded armrests, and they start looking for veins, and she's going through the same thing, nervous. Oh my gosh, this is going to hurt. I don't want to do this. Why do we have to do this? And then the needle finally comes out and it gets the blood drawn in no time. And she looked at me and she said, oh, that didn't really hurt at all. That was totally fine. I could hardly feel that. But the freak out before, the fear before, was so much worse than the actual experience of having the needle go in. And that's true for most of us, right? I used Becca's example because, it was recent, came to my mind, but also because this is me. I've been in that same situation. This is the human experience, is that the anticipation is typically worse than just the experience. With most emotions, the fear of feeling the emotion is much worse than the emotion itself. So we hold ourselves back from being fully alive, from going towards anything because we're afraid of how it might feel. So just notice that in your life. One of the most important things I think we can do in our life for ourselves is to sit down and consider what we're really afraid of. So I highly recommend that you grab a piece of paper if you haven't already started this, and start with this question at the top. What am I afraid of? And just let yourself fill up the piece of paper. Are you afraid of running out of money? Are you afraid that your kids will hate you? Are you afraid that you aren't a good mom? Are you afraid of bedtime? Are you afraid of becoming obese? Are you afraid of, being a bag lady and living on the street? Are you afraid of hurting someone? And really look at all those fears. What you will have on your paper when you answer that question is a list of thoughts that cause fear. So when I think, I'm afraid I'm not going to be a good mom, I'm thinking I'm going to yell at my kids, and then I'm going to beat myself up over it, and then I'm not going to recover, and I'm not going to show up well the next day, and I'm going to damage relationships with my kids. I think my kids are going to not want to be around me. I think I'm going to ruin them. I'm afraid of that. Really sit down and see if it's an illogical fear. What are you afraid of? And if you allowed yourself to experience that fear and access that thought of the thing you're afraid of, notice, is it holding you back in your life? And if you didn't have it, what would happen? Do you have any fears that are holding you back? Now, some of you may have fears that are holding you back that you want to keep, that you like. I have a fear of running out in traffic. It's valid. I want to keep that fear. I don't want to run out in traffic, especially after my fear that my kids are going to get hit by a car yesterday. I don't want anybody to get hit by a car and go in traffic. That's a valid fear. I have a fear of doing this crazy slingshot ride. It's the one that if you Google slingshot ride, that you'll find the people passing out when they do it. I did it once. We did it once with my husband. It was one of the scariest things I've done. I'm not interested in doing it again. And that's not a fear that's holding me back in my life. But I also have a fear of not knowing what to say when I meet people in a new environment. And I do think that fear holds me back. I can see the truth of that preventing me from fully being who I want to be in this life. I see myself avoiding situations and not showing up fully as myself in those situations. And so that's a fear that's completely irrational. I mean, what's the worst that can happen when I introduce myself to someone? I mean, the worst that could happen is they say, "Oh, I don't want to talk to you." But why is that scary? Because of what I make it mean. And that's my responsibility. People can do whatever they want to do. So when I read through my list of fears, I'm going to recognize some of those fears that are definitely preventing me from living my best life and some of the fears that I want to keep. And when I say it's a fear, what I really mean is it's a thought that I'm entertaining, and I'm not deliberately necessarily entertaining it, but I'm kind of letting it come into my mind, and I'm letting it linger, and I'm letting it prevent me from doing the things I want to do. I'm not deliberately creating something to oppose it. I've talked to moms who have a fear of their kids' off-track behavior, which is holding them back from creating the amazing relationships that they want with their kids because of what they're making the off-track behavior mean about them and their kids. I've talked to moms who are afraid of messing up with their parenting. They want to do things perfectly, which is holding them back from trusting themselves, trusting the process, trusting their kids. They judge themselves very harshly for messing up, which leads to more mess ups because their nervous system is activated, prefrontal cortex shuts down, and so on and so on. So that's one of the things that's great about writing down all of the things you're afraid of is it reveals your mind to yourself. And so you can see what's going on in there that you might not even be aware of, and then you can change it. You can change it. That's why we do daily peace if you're in league. And the truth is, fear isn't a big deal. It's just a vibration in your body. In fact, some of us can actually learn to enjoy feeling fear on purpose. For example, roller coaster rides, scary movies. There are things that we will intentionally do to get that adrenaline rush, to get the fear. For me, one of the best things I've done in my life is overcoming fear again and again and again. And I believe that's where all the good stuff is. Everything I really want in life is on the other side of the fear I'm creating in my own mind. When I think about why I don't have things in my life, it's usually linked back to a fear of what I make something mean, a fear of an emotion. I'm afraid to put myself out there. I'm afraid to talk to the right person. It's that fear holding me back from everything I desire. And if all I have to do is get comfortable with those fears, normalize them, stop making them mean what I used to make them mean, then I'm going to be all set. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, I don't think it's fear that's holding me back. I think it's something more like being unsure of what I want to do or not understanding if this is the right decision or not. And I want to make the right decision, or I'm just confused. I just need more information or time or clarity. And once I'm not confused, I'll move forward. I want to kind of give you guys a warning here. That's how many of us avoid feeling the emotion of fear. We avoid, we diminish, we downplay, we stay in confusion. We have this fear that we need to feel and create safety around something in order to get the result we want. But we sabotage the process subconsciously because instead of acknowledging and allowing and accepting and feeling that emotion of fear and moving towards it, what we do is we kind of just hang out by it. And we tell ourselves that we're confused or that we don't know or that we can't make a decision. Because as long as we're saying that, we have an excuse to not move towards the fear. You can't avoid fear and get anywhere. You can't avoid it. You can't go around it. You can't go under it. You can't resist it. You can't pretend it's not there. You have to go right through it. Fear is something that you want to walk towards, you guys. You want to embrace it. You want to explore it. It's going to allow you to have so much more capacity. All you've got to do is allow yourself to feel it. And then you can ask yourself, why am I feeling it? One of the best secrets I've learned is that in our day and age, most of the time, up to 90% of the time, the fear that we've created is unnecessary. Fear is not something that we need in our lives day to day, but it is something that is part of our evolution. So it's there and we can experience it in a whole new way. But we're in a new stage. We're in the next stage of human development, and learning to not let fear take over in situations that aren't really life or death, where fear, it's not necessary, is one of the things that we have the opportunity to learn. And when we learn this, we have the ability to live a life that will blow our minds. But we have to learn that fear is no big deal. We have to reconcile that idea in our brain. We have to recondition our brain that we're going to be okay, that we can take action, even if we have the emotion of fear. Because there's nothing, 9 times out of 10, nothing really to be afraid of other than the emotion that we're feeling. When we're watching a scary movie, we don't have to run out of the theater screaming. We can experience a scary movie. We can sit there and we can realize it's not real. Now, I don't like scary movies. I don't like horror shows. I don't like any of that kind of stuff. But if my kids have convinced me to watch one with them, I remind myself, these are just actors. This blood isn't real. This isn't really happening. This is pretend. You can use the same skill set in your life. You can say to yourself, Andy, this is okay. You can let your children be disappointed or mad at you. You can let your mom be upset. You can let your friend judge you. It's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. You're not going to die. No one's going to die. Nothing horrible is going to happen. This is just the perception of fear. This is just a thought that I have that creates the emotion of fear. This isn't something I have to believe. It's something I can feel. This isn't useful. This isn't going to save my life. Fear, most of the time, pretends to be necessary. And if we can learn to embrace it and allow ourselves to feel it over and over and over again, we can create whatever we want. When I look at people who have really created incredible lives I admire, I want to say, wow, they must just be fearless. But the truth is, no one's fearless. They have fear, we have fear, and I think that's reassuring. I've studied some crazy successful people recently, like Henry Ford and Andrew Carnegie, or Carnegie is how they say it in Scotland, just in case you didn't know that. My friends made fun of me for how I said it, but I realized that is one of the pronunciations. But I've studied them, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, and I've reminded myself as I've learned about their lives that they weren't immune to fear. They felt fear just like me because they were human. They just didn't let their fear stop them. They didn't use it as a reason to not become fully who they are. So here, a little assignment from this episode is write down everything you're afraid of. And then I want you to consider what it would be like if you just fully allowed yourself to feel the fear in every situation. Notice that most of those things on your list are there because you're afraid of how you think they will feel. Fear in and of itself is nothing to be afraid of. All right, you all. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Go connect your face off with your kids. Love you all. Ciao. If you enjoyed this episode, check out the last 8-week parenting pivot that we're doing this year. It's starting October 28th. It was going to start sooner, but I'm currently traveling internationally with my family and I overestimated how productive I'd be, so we pushed it back a couple of weeks. The pivot is where you're going to learn the entire Connect Method parenting framework in just 8 weeks, helping you have more cooperation, better listening, transitioning from corrective to connective parenting so that your kids actually want to listen to you. If you've been listening to the podcast and you love what we talk about here, but you're having trouble making that transition in your home, this is the ticket for you. It's the last pivot of the study also, which means that you can participate basically for free. In 8 weeks, you put a $200 deposit down. If you go through the entire pivot and do all of the things I ask so that we can track the progress and the results that Connect Method Parenting has in your home, then you get the deposit back at the end, which is so fantastic. Go to cmp.works/pivot. You're going to get all the details there. This is an 8-week parenting boot camp. It is not for the faint of heart, but it's for those who are really ready for a change. If you want to figure out how to get your kids to want to listen to you, if you want to feel more confident in your parenting, you're going to want to come jump in the pivot. I'm going to show you step by step how you go from correction-based techniques to connection-based techniques. We're not going to use consequences, threats, timeouts, any of that anymore. We're going to replace it with a connection-based framework. You're going to get better results and feel so much better. And let's have a little bit of fun. So if you're ready, jump over to cmp.works/pivot. You can get all of the info there. We're starting October 28th. I'm going to finish this with some comments from other parents who have gone through previous pivots, which, by the way, the average is 200% plus increase in listening, confidence, feeling more capable of showing up in a connective, not corrective way. So I'll drop their comments here, take a listen. And if you're interested, go over to cmp.works/pivot. I'll put it in the show notes too. Hope to see you there. We'll talk to you later, guys. Bye.
Like, are we only 2 weeks in? It's like night and day already. There's just been this total shift.
Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like I've packed in 20 years of counseling or something. Just seeing so much gold coming out of him as I've changed my belief about him in that situation and erased the 20-year-long narrative attached.
Hearts are so connected. So yeah, that has been really good. Thank you. I'm so grateful. And this really has been huge, such an answer to prayer for us.
I just can never express how great this has been and how thankful I am. It's been everything. It's been so good.
I really, really see the change.